I'm taking two of the most unfortunate and widely criticized logo designs of all time, and I want to use my years of professional motion design experience to redeem them with animation. London 2012 Olympic Games. Now this was the biggest backlash to a logo in all of human history. It was front page news. The presentation revealing it triggered epileptic seizures, Iran threatened to boycott the Olympics because they thought it spelled the word Zion, and others thought it resembled a certain Simpsons doing a certain act that I would certainly rather not mention, putting this into the accidentally rude category. If you don't know, don't look it up.
The goggles do nothing.
But can you blame that reaction? As 2012 was approaching, the air was thick with conspiracy.
This logo here is not what it appears.
4 sets of Olympic rings emanating from the 4 torches. These 4 torches also represent flying saucer landing pad pillars.
But regardless of what you did or didn't see in the logo, the public sentiment was clear.
Hideous and a waste of money.
Doesn't say much for London. No, that's poor.
What do you think of this?
I think it's rubbish.
And I think it's actually not that bad. I think we were pretty harsh to it. It's fine, but it was hated. So I have a job to do. I wanted to approach animating this logo using a punk aesthetic. Lots of grit, texture, bold colors, and cutout elements that I thought would work well with its energetic shapes. It's also imagery tied to British pop culture, and the main colors are almost the exact same as the cover of the Sex Pistols' Nevermind the Bollocks. Wait, am I allowed to say bollocks on YouTube? Shouldn't be an issue. I started by animating the individual shapes, moving about and falling into place, then cutting to reveal the logo. All at a low frame rate to give it that janky, angular motion that its janky, angular shapes imply, as well as giving it that stop motion effect. Then it was time to start adding the texture. I'm using some of my own looping texture, my own scanned in, painted and textured paper repeating in a looping pattern, as well as some elements I got from Texture Pack like Peter Quinn's Grit Kit. I adjusted the contrast of these looping textures with the curves effect and used the tint effect to map the white value to our bright pink, achieving this nice duotone effect for the background. I pre-composed the animated shapes into their own comps so I could then go in and add texture to just those shapes. I imported some cut out torn bits of paper, used tint to make them black and yellow, and turned on preserve underlying transparency so that they were only visible over our shapes. But it was missing something, and I was starting to lose focus because of the pressure. Biscuit after biscuit was breaking off into my tea. The original logo was criticised for not being British enough, and I certainly didn't have the nerve to face that level of criticism.
Think is rubbish.
It needed to be British beyond a shadow of a doubt. It needed a flag so beautiful, 23 countries couldn't help but add it to their own. The flag itself made from combining designs from each British country, except for Wales. A huge oversight, because the Welsh flag has a dragon on it, which would have looked sick. It's right up there with Sri Lanka's sword-wielding lion and Mozambique's AK-47 with bayonet attached. Again, sick. So I found some pictures of the old Jolly Roger, crushed the contrast and added those to the mix. But it still needed more. It needed something less obvious, and sneaking some imagery into this logo felt pretty fitting.
When you view this pattern from a perspective of understanding, it becomes clear that it is in fact a bird's eye view of a UFO taking off from a pyramid. The mark of the beast.
So I wanted to sneak in some iconic British imagery that is relevant and relatable to the lives and culture of Britain today. On screen, in this textured chaos for just a few frames, with some half-tone texture of their own to add to that gritty punk attitude. Iconic British things like His Majesty the King, HP sauce, and the contents of the British Museum. Wait, that's not British. I'll just use beans on toast, which only looks like a crime scene. Other uniquely British concepts I didn't have the space to include the tube, Sean Bean, and crisps. So I placed those in the background for a few frames each, in our recurring colours, as well as introducing a perfect 50% grey to represent Britain's iconic climate, and I was getting close. I added some scribble textures on the frame surrounding the cut to the final logo to soften that transition a bit, and then some effects over everything. A subtle shake with the transform effect, so each section shifts a tiny bit to give it a bit more motion. Some chromatic aberration, which is where the color channels shift, but please, be subtle with this effect. Perfect! Then some film grain and a posterized time to keep all of that to 12 frames per second. And it was done. Have your designs been called the worst of all time? Well, why not bring them to life with animation? And here at the Ben Marriott Animation Concern, we can help. We offer 2 packages: Motion Foundation, the ultimate beginner's guide to motion design, and if you've already got a grip on animation, the advanced course, Master Motion Design, where you'll take your skills to the moon. The Institute of Oriental Studies is the most widely cited worst logos, all because of an unfortunate resemblance to a certain act that squarely puts this into the accidentally rude genre of logo, winning in a very competitive field. But I'm going to approach this as sincerely as possible to honor the pure intentions of the original designer. A beautiful rising sun behind a temple, and absolutely nothing more. The first step was to recreate the logo in Illustrator from this low-resolution file. I experimented with some designs using the existing color palette for gradients in the sky. I want to make it look beautiful, epic, serene, and then resolve to the original logo. But I had to stop when it started to look a bit too much like the Mortal Kombat logo. I've heard of training forearms, but this is ridiculous. Then I got to animating in After Effects. First moving the sun into place, animating its position, then adding a gradient to the background that changes from red to white, moving down behind the temple. I added a gradient to the sun too, so it starts yellow and gets redder as it rises, to contrast with the red sky at the start and the yellow sky at the end. Then it was time for effects. First was some distortion caused by atmospheric refraction. So I threw on a turbulent displace effect, warping it horizontally. I also added a duplicate version of the sun behind the original, colored it yellow, and blurred it out so that it appeared to have a yellow glow. But it needed more glows. A lot more glows. And the regular glow effect from After Effects just wasn't cutting it. I loved how the red and yellow of the sun and sky bloomed over into the shadow of the temple, but it was nowhere near enough. So I brought out the big guns. Deep Glow, which is a paid plugin, but I think it's well worth it for the control you get. I have left an affiliate link in the description where I'll get a small kickback if you want to check it out, but also a non-affiliate link as well if you'd rather see me in rags. The intense blooming looked great, but it brightened the yellows in particular too much away from the original color palette, and washed out the red from the sun. The colors were an iconic part of the original vision, so I couldn't just let that slide. I warmed up the yellows with a hue and saturation effect, and added another red sun copy that faded on towards the end when the glow was washing it out just too much. Then I added some more glows, some to the ground manually by using feathered masks on a red solid that moved over the ground as the sun rose, giving the slight effect that the temple was casting a shadow and making the composition up to 8% more interesting. Then another hit of yellow using the same technique to the bottom of the sky behind the temple to make the sun coming up just feel extra intense. Don't just stop with what a plugin gives you. Go the extra step, direct where you want the light, where you want the color, not just where it is easiest. It does take time, it takes extra layers, but it is worth it. Also, we always label our layers, so that won't be an issue. Lastly, I added some film grain and a slight zoom in to make it feel more cinematic. Here it is. Now, I don't know for how long just yet, but I'm predicting I'm going to spend a lot of time editing this video. So if you want to help me out, you can do that by watching another one of my videos, like this one where I try to create the ultimate YouTube graphics. I think you'll like it. Or your money back.
Hideous and a waste of money.